Hi, welcome back to Brew Over and Made, and today we're going to be discussing sharpening your planer blades so you don't have to keep buying blades. Now, when your planer is acting like this, it's becoming very hard to feed through, and the only shavings you're getting is dust. Then your planer blades need sharpening. It's very important to keep all your blades sharp in all your tools to keep your tools' health in check, because the more dull your blades are, the harder your tool has to work, and that can lead to premature motor wear. Now, how you want to take these blades off is you just undo all of those screws, take out the backing supports for the blades, and your blade should just pop straight out. This is the jig I will be using to show you how to sharpen your blades, and it's how I sharpen my blades. You want to go ahead and cut two 45-degree slots into a scrap piece of wood. I like to screw it down to the table so when I'm sharpening it, it's not jumping all around the place. And then you want to add these little supports so when you're thrusting back and forward with your sharpening stone, that it doesn't push your blades out. So there's a nice little bit of edit in there, making me more of a YouTuber. But you just want to make sure your blades aren't jumping around the place, and you'll see why I cut them both at a 45 degree. This makes it so the bevels are flat, so you can just grab a stone, lay it on top, and you don't have to worry about finding angles. So you can just go to town on it and make sure that everything is perfect. Now, you want to do even strokes along the full length of the blade, and you want to keep even pressure so the blade continues to be flat. So after you've used your stone to get all the roughing in and you've taken off a bit of material, you want to slowly work up your grits to make it sharp, and you want to find something with a flat edge. And here's a broken chisel that I'm going to use for my flat edge because I know the back of it is flat. So I'm going to start off at 100 grit since I've already used that stone, and I'm just going to put it on top and just start going back and forward with it. You probably want to use actual metal sanding paper instead of just any old sandpaper, but that's what I had on hand. So that's after I've gone through 100 grit all the way up to 800 grit. So now I've just got some wet and dry sandpaper, and I'm going to go to 12,000 grit all the way up to 3,000 grit. And I'm not quite sure whether this step is quite necessary. It's probably sharp enough for 800 grit, but you can see there I got a nice mirror finish on it, and the edge is nice and sharp. But it's not quite ready to put back onto the planer yet, since we have created a burr on the back of the planer. So you want to take it out of the jig, being careful with the blades because they are now sharp, and especially with those burrs on the back, it's almost like a saw blade. So be very careful when taking it out and handle them with care. I can't tell you how many times I've cut myself by carelessly throwing around planer blades, and it's always on the tip of your fingers and it'll open and close whenever you're trying to do something. It's just a headache, so be wary and don't cut yourself. Now, this is all the material I've removed from the blade. I've taken off quite a lot because I had some quite deep chips in there, but you don't need to go as hard as I did and remove that much material. I just had some quite bad chips in there and it was very dull, so I decided just to bring it right back to raw metal again. You can do this two ways. You can do it like this on the back of the blade, or you can grab yourself something that you know is nice and flat. This isn't flat. You'd probably want a granite top or something that you know is perfectly flat to do this on, but this is flat enough for what I needed to do. We're not trying to make a chef's knife here, we're just sharpening something that's going to cut wood. So don't worry too much about getting a perfectly flat surface, just get something that's relatively flat just to get the burr off. And before I put my blades back on, I like to make sure they create a nice surface finish, because if the wood's not cutting right, then I know I need to go back and sharpen it a bit more, or try get rid of whatever burr is left on there. But once you're confident that it's all nice and sharp, then you want to put it back in your planer, which is always the most annoying part because it's so fiddly. You got to balance all of these bolts onto that plate, and then you've got to make sure everything stays in there as you drop your blade in. And you'll see I struggle in a minute because one of the springs pop out and I've got to try and find it, and I'm trying to do this with one hand as well because I'm recording. But to be honest with you, this has been the quickest I've been able to put the blade back in. Usually I'm there picking bolts up and throwing things around and basically just getting stressed, but I guess I've done it enough times now to be able to do it all nice and smoothly. Usually you have springs on the bottom of the recess where the blade goes, so you can more easily adjust your height. That's what I'm putting back in there because a spring popped out of its hole, so I'm just putting the spring back in, and then we put the blade back on top. And you want to be careful not to push too hard because you'll cut yourself, but you can see that there the spring's in action. That helps us set the blade with the setting tool that comes with your planer, or at least should come with your planer. Now, I don't know what it's like for other planers, but for my planer, that little box you see in the middle there is where the blade lies. And this is the part I always hate, because I'm always worried I'm going to roll the edge over, because I've spent so much time sharpening the blade, and then I'm pressing something metal onto the blade. But this is how I set my planer blades. Now, for my blades, they need to be set 1 millimeter above the round shaft. So that's what the setting blade does. It keeps it 1 millimeter. And after you've put the blades on, you've tightened it all, you just want to quickly check that it's all consistent, and you haven't got one side poking out more than the other, because you can get a chip under and lift one side of your jig up. So obviously you don't want that, because when you run something through, it's not going to be flat, it's going to come out on a taper. So you need to make sure the blade's nice and flat and even, and then you want to go and test it out. And you can see there I'm getting nice shavings coming off. This is the shavings I was getting before I sharpened my blades. It's basically just dust and tear out, and this is the nice lovely chips we're getting after we sharpen the blades, and those are what you want. So that's how to sharpen your planer blades, and I recommend doing this. I do it after every single project, really, because you want sharp blades. Not only does it make life much more easier, it cuts wood a lot more easier. You don't have to sit there forcing it through, but it helps keep your tools good as well, because the more heat you introduce into a tool, obviously parts expand. So in a hypothetical situation, let's say you're running dull blades through this planer, you keep pushing the wood through and you keep pushing it through, you're making the motor work really hard. That shaft, the shaft on the motor is going to expand because of the heat. Now with that expansion, you can ruin your bearings because they can get hot, and as it expands you can end up making them seize up. The fan on the end of your motor that helps keep the motor cool, usually made out of plastic, and if the shaft expands too much, the fan on the back can fail, break, do all sorts. And this doesn't just go for planers, it goes for all your tools. They're all set to run with sharp blades. If you're pulling them through dull blades, it's going to heat up, it's going to ruin your motor, and it's just not going to be an enjoyable experience. And you'll see it on your projects as well. You'll see a lot more tear out, you'll have to do a lot more sanding. So just take a moment after every project to sharpen your tools, or maybe set a day each month where you sharpen everything. You'll thank me for it later. So thank you for watching, I really appreciate you hanging around, and subscribe if you want to see what I get up to next. I'll see you later.